Imagine a federal raid. The year is 1998. Armed agents, operating under the full authority of the United States government, storm a commercial facility in Arlington, Texas. They are not looking for narcotics. They are not dismantling a violent cartel. They are searching for literature. They are seizing books, cookbooks to be exact. They confiscate the inventory, and they mandate the physical destruction of educational materials with a cold, calculated zeal usually reserved for threats to national security. The target of this militarized suppression is not a biological weapon, nor is it a synthetic poison. It is a plant, a simple, deep-rooted botanical, a natural root alternative to the industrial sweeteners dominating the American diet. A green herb that produces a pure, unadulterated sweetness 300 times more potent than refined sugar. And that singular biological fact, in the eyes of the global chemical and agricultural monopolies, made it the most dangerous substance in America. To understand why federal agents were mobilized to burn recipe books, you must look at the financial architecture of the modern world. You must understand the sheer scale of the empire that this plant threatened to dismantle. For centuries, the global sugar industry has operated as an untouchable monolith. Valued today at over $100 billion, it is an empire built originally on colonial extraction, slave labor, and ruthless environmental domination. In the modern era, that empire has only grown more sophisticated, mutating into the high-fructose corn syrup cartels that flood our food supply with cheap, subsidized, and highly addictive processed sugars. Alongside this agricultural behemoth sits the artificial sweetener market, a multi-billion-dollar synthetic empire built in laboratories, patented by chemical giants, and protected by an army of lobbyists. Together, these twin industries hold an absolute monopoly on the human desire for sweetness. They control the commodity, they control the supply chain, and most importantly, they control the biological addiction that fuels their profit margins. Human beings are evolutionarily hardwired to seek out sweet flavors. In the ancient ancestral environment, sweetness was an incredibly rare signal. It told the primal brain that a food source was non-toxic, ripe, and packed with the dense, life-saving caloric energy necessary for survival. Mother Nature made sweetness rare, and she made it sacred. But modern industry weaponized this evolutionary survival trait. They stripped the fiber, isolated the sucrose, and engineered a dietary landscape where lethal doses of refined sugar are available on every corner for pennies. When you consume refined white sugar or industrial corn syrup, you are setting off a violent chemical chain reaction. Sucrose hits your bloodstream like a tidal wave. Your pancreas is immediately forced into a state of biological emergency, flooding your system with the hormone insulin to force toxic levels of glucose out of your blood and into your cells. Over time, under the relentless bombardment of a modern diet, this delicate mechanism breaks down. The cells become resistant to the insulin. The pancreas exhausts its beta cells. The result is a slow-motion biological collapse, systemic inflammation, rampant obesity, and the modern plague of type 2 diabetes. It is a metabolic crisis of unprecedented scale, entirely manufactured by the dietary environment created by corporate agriculture. But nature, in her profound wisdom, provided an escape route. Long before European galleons cast their shadows across the Atlantic, the indigenous Guarani people of South America held a sacred contract with the earth. Deep in the lush, unforgiving terrains of Paraguay and Brazil, they cultivated a profound botanical knowledge. For over 1,500 years, they utilized a deep-rooted perennial herb they called ka'ahe'e, which translates simply to the sweet herb. They did not synthesize it in a stainless steel laboratory. They did not filter it through bone char or bleach it with industrial chemicals. They simply plucked it from the earth. They used this natural root alternative to sweeten bitter medicinal teas, like yerba mate, and chewed the raw plant to soothe digestive ailments. It was a flawless gift of the soil, demanding no refineries and no exploitative plantation labor. In 1887, a Swiss botanist named Moisés Santiago Bertoni was charting the deep forests of eastern Paraguay. He had heard whispers from local guides of a strange, miraculous plant. When he finally procured a specimen, he was astounded. A single fragment placed on the tongue delivered a profound, lingering sweetness that defied all known botanical logic. By 1905, it was scientifically classified as Stevia rebaudiana. Why is this plant so terrifying to the architects of our food supply? The answer lies in its undeniable, miraculous science. The intense sweetness of this botanical does not come from carbohydrates. It does not come from glucose, sucrose, or fructose. It is derived from an evolutionary masterpiece, a series of complex molecules called steviol glycosides, hidden deep within the plant's cellular structure and drawn up from its resilient root system. When these glycosides touch the human tongue, they bind flawlessly to the T1R2 and T1R3 sweet taste receptors. They send an immediate, powerful signal of sweetness to the brain, a signal 300 times more intense than industrial sugar. But here is the biological miracle. The human body does not possess the enzymes required to break down steviol glycosides. They cannot be absorbed into the bloodstream in the small intestine. They pass through the digestive tract entirely unrecognized as fuel. They yield 0 calories. They trigger absolutely no glucose response in the blood. The pancreas remains perfectly silent. There is 0 insulin spike. You experience the profound neurobiological satisfaction of sweetness without paying the catastrophic physiological toll. It is a biological free lunch. It is a direct cure for the manufactured metabolic crisis. And in the eyes of Wall Street, a free, unpatentable cure is a financial threat that must be eradicated at all costs. By the mid-20th century, the chemical industry realized there was an absolute fortune to be made in the emerging concept of diet foods, but they had absolutely no intention of harvesting a natural plant. Natural plants cannot be patented. You cannot own the exclusive intellectual property rights to a leaf or a root that grows freely in the dirt. To build a monopoly, you must invent a synthetic molecule, patent its chemical structure, and mercilessly crush any unpatentable competition. Enter the dark era of laboratory sweeteners. Saccharin, originally derived from coal tar derivatives. Aspartame, synthesized in 1965 by a chemist working on anti-ulcer drugs for the pharmaceutical giant G.D. Searle. Sucralose, created by chlorinating sugar molecules. These were highly profitable, heavily patented industrial chemicals. By the late 1970s and 1980s, the chemical sweetener cartel had a massive problem. The Japanese public, fiercely protective of their health and wary of the carcinogenic concerns surrounding early artificial sweeteners, had fully embraced the ancient sweet herb. The Japanese government banned several synthetic sweeteners and turned to nature. They extracted the steviol glycosides and used them to sweeten everything from soft drinks to traditional snacks. By the late 1980s, this natural extract had captured over 40% of the Japanese sweetener market. It was safe, it was cheap, it was biologically flawless, and it was entirely natural. The American chemical cartels watched the Japanese market with absolute horror. If this deep-rooted botanical gained a foothold in the United States, the multi-billion-dollar patent monopolies on aspartame and other artificial sweeteners would collapse overnight. The American consumer, given the choice between a natural, ancient plant and a chlorinated, laboratory-synthesized chemical, would choose the plant. The solution for the industry was simple, brutal, and highly effective. Weaponize the federal regulatory apparatus. In the late 1980s, the United States Food and Drug Administration began receiving a series of highly coordinated, anonymous trade complaints regarding the natural sweet herb. To this day, the specific authors of those complaints remain officially unnamed in the archives, but the source was glaringly obvious to anyone paying attention. The synthetic sweetener lobby had deployed its weapon. In 1991, acting exclusively on these anonymous industry complaints, the FDA issued a draconian import alert. They unilaterally banned the importation of the plant into the United States. They did not ban it because a single human being had been harmed. They banned it under the fabricated pretext that it was an unsafe food additive, despite hundreds of years of safe indigenous consumption and decades of widespread, highly documented, incident-free use in Japan. The historical hypocrisy of this moment is staggering. At the exact same time the FDA was banning a natural herb, they were enthusiastically protecting synthetic chemicals like aspartame. The approval process for aspartame is widely considered one of the most compromised chapters in the agency's history. It involved suppressed tumor data, highly questionable laboratory practices, and extreme political pressure orchestrated by powerful corporate executives. But aspartame had patents. Aspartame had highly paid lobbyists. Aspartame had former corporate CEOs sitting in the highest levels of government. The sweet herb had only its ancient roots, its biological perfection, and the truth. And in Washington, the truth does not pay dividends. The government crackdown quickly escalated from a border embargo to domestic intimidation. The FDA unleashed a campaign of terror against small, independent natural food companies. They maliciously categorized the raw plant as an unapproved, dangerous drug. If an independent tea company dared to include the leaf in their herbal blend, their shipments were seized and destroyed. If a local farmer grew it and attempted to sell it as a sweetener, they were threatened with federal prosecution and the total destruction of their livelihood. This systematic persecution culminated in the infamous 1998 raid in Texas. The FDA targeted a company named Stevia, an importer and distributor of the natural herb. The federal agents did not merely seize the physical plant extract. They crossed a line into blatant authoritarianism. They ordered the destruction of literature. They demanded that books, pamphlets, and educational materials detailing the indigenous history and botanical properties of the plant be physically destroyed. Books containing simple culinary recipes on how to bake with a natural herb were treated as illicit, dangerous contraband. Pause and consider the absolute madness of this event. The government of the United States was literally burning books to protect the market share of synthetic chemical corporations. The science was never the point. Public health was never the point. The only objective was the preservation of artificial scarcity. They had to make the natural alternative illegal, so the public would be forced to purchase the synthetic poison. For over a decade following the raids, the plant was kept in a bizarre regulatory purgatory. Through the tireless efforts of natural health advocates, it was eventually permitted to be sold, but only strictly labeled as a dietary supplement. It was a federal crime to label it as a sweetener. It was legally actionable to even suggest on the packaging that the plant tasted sweet. Think about the sheer dystopian absurdity of that legal fiction. A plant that is unequivocally 300 times sweeter than sugar was legally forbidden by the United States government from being called sweet. But the story of this suppression does not end with a ban. It ends with a far more insidious tactic: corporate hijacking. By the mid-2000s, the American public was waking up. They were growing increasingly educated and fiercely wary of artificial, laboratory-made chemicals. The patents on the first generation of artificial sweeteners were expiring. The massive global beverage corporations, sensing a massive shift in consumer demand, realized they desperately needed a natural, zero-calorie sweetener to keep their soda empires afloat. But they still adamantly refused to allow the raw, unpatentable plant into the free market. So, they executed a masterstroke of regulatory manipulation. Corporate titans, including the agricultural monopoly Cargill and the Coca-Cola Company, spent millions of dollars developing a highly industrialized, chemically isolated version of one specific, minor compound found within the plant, a molecule known as rebaudioside A. They developed a patented, multi-step chemical extraction process to isolate this single molecule. They stripped away the plant's natural biological synergy. They removed its minor glycosides. They erased its deep-rooted, earthy profile. They took a vibrant, living botanical and chemically bludgeoned it into a white, highly processed powder that looked, behaved, and could be packaged exactly like the synthetic chemicals it was replacing. In 2008, these multinational conglomerates submitted their patented, highly processed extract to the FDA for approval. Almost instantly, the exact same regulatory agency that had spent 20 years raiding farms, seizing herbal shipments, and burning cookbooks about the natural plant, declared this corporate patented derivative generally recognized as safe. They rubber-stamped it without hesitation. The raw plant, the ancient, miraculous leaf chewed by the Guarani people, the exact same leaf that sparked the federal raids, remained trapped in regulatory gray areas. But the synthetic-adjacent, corporate-owned isolate was suddenly legally permitted in every grocery store, every diet soda, and every coffee shop in America. They had taken a free gift of the earth, outlawed it, legally terrorized anyone who tried to share it, genetically and chemically stripped it down in a laboratory, patented the ghost of it, and sold it back to the public at a premium. The suppression of the miracle was lifted only when the corporate monopoly was entirely secured. This is the hidden architecture of the world you live in. You are told that modern industry provides convenience and innovation, but the truth is that modern industry excels primarily at manufacturing artificial scarcity. They blind you to the free, miraculous resources of the natural world, so they can sell you an inferior, synthetic replacement. They want you addicted to the metabolic poison of industrial sugar, and they want you dependent on their patented chemical alternatives when that poison inevitably makes you sick. Yet, despite the billions of dollars spent on chemical patents, despite the federal raids, despite the burned books, and despite the relentless decades of corporate propaganda, the biological truth remains entirely intact. Nature cannot be permanently legislated out of existence. The ancient sweet herb is not a fragile, laboratory-dependent creation. It is incredibly, defiantly resilient. It thrives in poor soil. It demands minimal water. It possesses an inherent evolutionary defense against pests. Its intense, concentrated sweetness naturally repels insects that attempt to consume its leaves. It is a biological fortress designed by the earth to thrive in the margins, completely ignoring the laws of men. Right now, in the very world that tried to erase it, you can buy a seed for mere pennies. You can plant it in a simple clay pot on your windowsill or out at the edge of your garden. It asks for almost nothing. In a matter of weeks, it will sprout. It will drive its roots into the soil, and you can walk up to it, pluck a leaf directly from the stem, and place it on your tongue. In that single, unmediated act, you step entirely outside the manufactured system. You bypass the $100 billion sugar empire. You bypass the chemical patent cartels. You bypass the FDA lobbyists, the public relations firms, and the pharmaceutical companies waiting to treat the diabetes they helped create. You experience a sweetness 300 times more profound than anything ever grown on a colonial sugar plantation. Your pancreas remains at absolute peace. Your insulin remains perfectly steady. You are tapping into an ancient, unbroken lineage of biological harmony that existed long before the first corporate lobbyist ever walked the marble halls of Washington. They tried to burn the books. They tried to seize the harvest. They tried to rewrite the fundamental laws of nature to protect their balance sheets. But they forgot one undeniable, unstoppable truth about the earth. When you bury a miracle, you are only planting a seed. The plant came back. It is growing right now, waiting for you in the dirt. And the only thing standing between you and the absolute, sweet abundance of reality is the willingness to look past the lies they sold you.